Karen Feinerman. She's the CEO and co-founder of hedge fund Metropolitan Capital Advisors and a mainstay on CNBC's Fast Money, breaking down markets in real time. Raised in Los Angeles by an orthopedic surgeon father and, in her words, a tiger mom who expected success, she set her sights early on Wharton, then Wall Street. By her mid-20s, she co-founded a hedge fund, going on to succeed in a male-dominated industry, and had 2 sets of twins. Today, she's using her platform to change how women think about money. Her message? Understand risk and advocate for yourself. A CNBC Changemakers Advisory Board member, Karen Feinerman is in the Changemakers and Power Players spotlight. Karen, thank you so much for joining us on Changemakers and Power Players. When we launched our inaugural Changemakers list, I knew I wanted you on our advisory board. So you've been on our advisory board since the beginning because you are such a leader in your field. You have had this incredible career in finance. And what's so impressive to me is that you've juggled this career in finance with this career that you've built in media, specifically speaking to women and talking to women about their careers and money and destigmatizing talking about money. And in addition to a book you wrote, you also have this incredible podcast, which I was so lucky to be on.
I was thrilled to have you.
Thank you. You had me on to talk about my book, How She Does It, and you have new episodes dropping every Tuesday. So now the tables have turned, and I'm so grateful to have you on Changemakers and Power Players.
Well, I am very happy to be on. I got to say, I'm a little bit nervous. I see now what it feels like to be in the other seat. So,
well, I want to dig into this because you are on CNBC's Fast Money multiple times a week. You do not strike me as a person who ever gets nervous. So why are you feeling nervous?
I don't know. But I did have someone tell me that anxiety is just excitement.
You know, my parents told me that whenever I was feeling nervousness, they were like, that actually isn't nervousness, it's excitement. And I don't know if that has served me well or actually has warped my perception of when I'm actually nervous. But I'm honored. You don't need to be nervous. This is a safe space. And we really just want to hear your story. And one of the things that's most incredible about your story is that you grew up here in LA. And your father was a doctor for the UCLA Bruins basketball team. But then you and your sister went on to have these incredibly successful careers in totally different fields. Your sister, Wendy Feinerman, producer of Forrest Gump, you have been a hedge fund titan, success across the finance industry. What was it like growing up in your household? What was in the water that both of you grew up to be so successful?
Well, there's 5 of us, and it was my mother. She was in the water. She was a tiger mom, sort of the highest order, and so we all just felt like we had to be successful. There was no other choice. So it was my mom. She particularly to the girls. There's 4 girls and a boy. Very sadly, there was another brother who died, and then my parents had 2 more kids, 2 girls. So 4 girls and a boy, and the message was, she said, I buy my girls Calvin Klein clothes. This was like the 80s, so that was, and she said, and then when they graduate college, they got to figure out how to pay for them themselves. That was literally what I call the Calvinist philosophy. And it was my mother.
And did she work? Where did this come from that she put this pressure on the 2 of you in particular?
She didn't work. It was a very traditional marriage, and she stayed home and raised the kids, and my dad was orthopedic surgeon at UCLA, and but she always wanted to. She was really interested in buying real estate and selling it. And when she got older and the kids were gone, she became a teacher, and then she also did some real estate deals on the side. So it was her sort of her chance to be the entrepreneur she wanted to be.
So you felt this pressure from her that you had to be successful. But you decided to focus on finance, which I'm
Yes.
sure was not something that was in the forefront of a lot of people's minds out here on the West Coast at the time. Where did your early interest in business come from?
Okay, this is an embarrassing story, but it is true. So I remember reading this article about Ivan Boesky, was how I thought you pronounced his name. I'd never heard anyone speak his name. And he was a risk arbitrageur at that time, not knowing that he was also an insider trader. But he had this sort of crazy life, and I thought, wow, I want to be a risk arbitrageur. And and when I was a senior in high school, I told my parents, look, I'm only applying to Wharton, and if I don't get in, I'm not going to college. So I was headed to Wall Street one way or another.
And you did get into Wharton.
I
and
did.
you did
Thankfully,
go to Wall Street.
it was a really dumb plan, but thankfully they took me. So
But what's so interesting is there's all this data about how women feel differently about risk than men, and this big movement now, including by people like changemaker Jenny Just, to get women to engage more in risk. But it sounds like from day one, you loved the idea of managed risks.
I did love the idea of managed risk, although I had an unmanaged risk that was the worst trade of hopefully my life early on. And I was like, wow, I kind of have to rethink about risk. Someone like Jenny Just is so great at assessing risk and knowing when to really, push hard, which is an extraordinary skill. So good for her for teaching it.
But so what was your big mistake? And give us a little sense of what your life was like. You graduated Wharton, you're Wall Street in the 80s. What was it like?
There was a lot of shoulder pads. It was a lot of big hair. But I worked for the Bellsberg family and on their risk arbitrage desk. And I just found it fascinating. And I loved the excitement of it. At that time, the world was different. You literally got your news every morning from the Wall Street Journal at your door, and you didn't get a ton of updates during the day. But I really wanted to make money, which I know doesn't sound as good as being financially independent, but they are the same thing. And that was exciting to me. And then I had this one terrible trade where I just didn't take into account what is the downside? What's our worst case scenario, and how bad is that if it happens? I hope I never do that again.
So you were clearly drawn to this idea of managed risk, the value in taking risks. How do you feel like your perspective on that has changed over time? And what did you learn from that one bad scenario? And I don't know if you could tell us what it was.
It was United Airlines was getting taken over in an LBO, and it was a trade that the specifics called a 1-by-2 put spread. The specifics aren't that important. You don't need to understand options. It's that if this deal were to break, not only would the stock go down to where it was before the takeover, something else bad might be happening at the same time. So it was going to go down way more than that. I didn't factor in the deal breaking entirely. I didn't factor in what would cause a more macro thing that would cause it to go down. So I put this thing on for $2.50, thinking I could maybe lose 2.5 or make 20 in the best case, not knowing I would have to pay 80 to get out. So that's a really, really, really bad trade. Really bad.
So what did you learn from that horrendous trade? How did you come back from it?
It was tough. It stayed with me. It's literally like a scar in my psyche. But I learned to cap your risk, understand your risk, and size the bet accordingly. And those are, if you can learn that of someone else's story, great. You do learn it quite well when it's your own really bad trade.
And so do you feel like you're more risk averse because of that, or you're just more cautious, or how would you put it?
I think I'm a better risk manager. I'm not more risk averse. I won't take that kind of risk, but a better risk manager, hopefully.
So what was Wall Street in the 80s like? There are all these stories of how male dominated it was. We've all read the stories in the books about that time. Did you feel like you were in this tiny minority as a woman in this male-dominated field?
Absolutely. There was no question. Any meeting, my mom told me, don't take typing, don't, you don't, that's not the job you want to have. It was sort of interesting. It was always the expectation that, I would get the coffee, or I would keep the notes, or whatever it was, that kind of thing. Plus, I was younger too, so but I was very, very aware of it, and sometimes it was to my advantage.
How so?
So I liked when I got away from the risk arbitrage business and started doing research, just long focused. I really liked the industrial space. That was interesting to me, and there weren't a lot of women covering the industrial. So if you go to industrial conference, I'd always say you're a 10. You're a 10 at an industrial conference. There's no women there. And so you could go up to any CEO and, I really wanted to know what they had to say. And they were, happy to have the attention. And so it was an advantage there.
So just being unusual, being rare made
Yes.
you sort of stick out more in a positive way. But
Yeah.
did it ever bother you, or did you just learn to get used to it?
I was sort of used to it. I was a real tomboy growing up, so I played on the in a PE I did with the boys, so I was used to it, and it's changed now, but it was a long time to change.
Yeah. I was surprised when I was looking at your bio that you started your own firm when you were really young. It looks like you started when you were just 5 years out of Wharton. Is that true?
That is true. I had worked for a risk arbitrage desk, and my boss then, Jeffrey Schwartz, when they blew up, I saw that risk too. The family had a serious financial setback, and I went to DLJ, and I was on their risk arb desk, and I realized, you could be the best risk arbitrager in the world in 1990 to 92, and you weren't going to make money. So timing is everything. At that time, Jeffrey Schwartz came back to me and said, hey, we should start a hedge fund. And we did. And you could have been the dumbest hedge fund manager in the world in 1992, and you were going to make money. It was just too good. So that's how I guess I didn't, looking back, that sounds, okay, that's kind of quick. But timing is everything.
So you're what, 26 years old, you start your own hedge fund. Did it feel aggressive or ambitious for someone so young, especially a woman in a male-dominated field, or was it just like the next, one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, one foot in front of the other. I mean, Jeffrey was mentor, partner, he, and the hedge fund business was entirely different then. We started just family and friends, and then the business started to become more institutionalized, but we were early. We were early in the space.
So having navigated those worlds and taken on your own risks of starting your own thing and figuring out how timing is everything and how to react to that, what would your advice be to people of any gender who are trying to navigate those earlier days of their careers?
I mean, I would be, if you can, find somewhere where you're learning and keep learning. And sometimes I hear young people who feel like, all right, I've had a couple of years experience in this field, I'll stay in this field. And clearly now we have to be more flexible. Things are changing quicker than they ever were, but just always be learning new skills.
So is that why you became a media personality? Because you were a risk arbitrager, then hedge fund, and now you continue to run your fund, but you also became a media personality. And I heard that the folks at Fast Money were going through a magazine of the top hedge fund managers, because that's how they found things in those days, and then picked up the phone and called you and asked you if you wanted to join the show.
They did. It was Trader Monthly. It was a Women in Wall Street article. And they said, oh, do you want to come try out for this show? And it was not on my radar screen at all. I had no expectation. And so I decided, all right, what the hell? I'll give it a try. And so Susan Krakauer and Mary Duffy, who
our colleagues at CNBC,
yes.
my colleagues at CNBC, yeah.
Yeah, so we did this screen test with Dylan Radigan was the host at the time, and it was, Guy, and I mean, it was fun. We had a good time, and I thought, oh, you know what, that was sort of interesting. And then, they asked me, do I want to be on the show? And I remember thinking, you know what, I'm a hedge fund manager. And I sort of taking myself very seriously. And what would that mean if I were on a show? What would that do to my reputation? And then I realized, okay, I'm a hedge fund manager. What kind of reputation do I really have? Anyway, what the hell? Do the show. It's fun. And so I remember they wanted to sign a 3-year deal. And I said, I cannot fathom a 3-year deal. But I ended up signing it. And now we're in our 20th year, which is just astounding to me.
That is awesome. So my first year, I came to CNBC from Fortune magazine. I was like, oh, I should only commit to a year. My first contract with CNBC, I only was committed for a year, and I've been there for 20 years. So,
right.
Yeah, it sucks you in.
It does.
But 20 years of appearing on the show every week, while at the same time you're running a hedge fund. These are two totally different skill sets. You're talking about stocks. You're being transparent about what you're owning and what you're not. This is something that most hedge fund managers would never do or don't ever do.
Right.
And is also a very different skill set. Talking about, articulating your theory around different stocks. Why does it make sense for you to do both of these things?
Well, so it's fun. There's that. But also, you probably know this well. When you're on TV, people call you back. Often. You know what I mean?
Unless they're trying to dodge your phone call.
Unless they're trying to dodge your phone call.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably more an issue for me than for you.
Yeah. So having access to more people was really helpful. And I also I remember early on the show, we'd have these people they follow charts, and that's their thing. And I was very much in the finance of it, and, the sort of fundamentals, we call them. And so it occurred to me, you know what, it doesn't matter if I subscribe to the idea about how charts are a better prognosticator. It's do other people. And if enough other people believe that works, then it will work. And so being open to looking at things in different ways. And it's hard to have, be accountable and see your stuff move and be wrong. Being wrong is not fun.
And it's a lot more public when you have to talk about it on a TV show.
It is. It is a lot more public.
Just between you and your LPs.
Yes, it is. And sometimes I feel that makes me manage losers better than it would otherwise.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yes.
The thing that I think is very applicable from your situation to a lot of people in the working world now is that for many years, people lived their lives effectively in private. But now, because of the outsized power of social media, you have people in every single field who are effectively broadcasting about their careers and about their opinions, whether it's on LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram, and are really making the choice to take their private work or their work and make it part of the public world with that kind of transparency. And it feels like a lot of it, the reason behind that, it probably has to do with what you're seeing, is that there's value in having a public voice. But I wonder if you feel like it changes the way you do the job itself. Does having to articulate your perspective in that kind of format change your decision making about your buys, not just the downside potential?
Mm-hmm. It does. It does make you sort of, all right, let's proactively think about, as opposed to inertia, why do we own this? I often ask myself, okay, if I own none, would I buy it today? Right? And so it sort of makes me constantly sort of refresh, as opposed to just, you tend to fall a little bit in love with your winners and let them ride and not look at it so much with a fresh eye. And your losers as well. If I own none, would I want to own this? Often, no. You kind of, we're psychologically driven, but you got to really not be. If people want their stock to get back to their cost basis, and then they'll sell it, which is a irrelevant piece of information. what your cost basis is. But people
But that's when feelings overcome the
yes,
data.
yes,
Yeah. And throughout all this time, you've been increasingly interested in women's sports and made a big investment in the WNBA. Um, tell us about where this all came from. You said you were a tomboy, but did you play a lot of sports growing up?
I did play a lot of sports. I was a pretty competitive tennis player, and my father had sort of wished that I would become a professional tennis player, but that was solved for me. The truth is, I really just was not good enough, but I always loved women's sports, and I had always loved the Liberty. Then the WNBA did this, they hired Kathy Engelbert and did this transformative capital raise. I was delighted to do that. And then I would always go to Liberty games, and I had just begged Joe and Clara, please, please let me buy equity. And finally, they did. And so last year we bought a stake in the Liberty. And so it's super fun. I love what's happened to the league. Hopefully, by the time this airs, we will see a collective bargaining agreement and avoid a strike.
Yes, there's a lot of interest in that. But what I think is interesting is you may have only made this big investment more recently, but you've been a believer in the WNBA and in the value of women's sports for a lot longer than it was trendy.
Yes.
And so going back 2017, 2018, what was it that you saw then about the business of women's sports that back then other people didn't see?
Right. I thought that there wasn't enough appreciation for the quality of the women's skills, how amazing these players are. And I really believed that there was somewhere a business there, and I had looked at trying to buy the Liberty, and honestly it was just too more than I could do in so many ways. Thankfully, Joe and Clara Sy, who own the Nets and own the Barclays Center, bought it, and they have done an extraordinary job. There's no chance that I could have done the job that they did, but they made it an event. I don't know if you've ever been to a game, Julia.
I have.
You
I
have.
haven't been to a Liberty game, but
Right.
I live here in LA, and I've been to a couple of Sparks games. The Sparks are our LA
yes, of course.
WNBA team.
Right.
And it's incredible. And you know what? I love bringing my sons and their friends both to Sparks games and also to Angel City games. Those are our women's soccer team here. But I think they're incredible, and I'm always bewildered that the stadium isn't sold out, and that
Right.
and maybe it is sold out in New York, but
It is
it's
sold
not
out in
yet
New York.
in LA, and I wish it were.
And the Valkyries they're sold out. I mean, just an extraordinary job that they've done. I hope that we get back on track, that there's no strike, but I don't know, Julie, if you're in New York.
I know. I would love
Okay.
to come.
Okay.
I would love to come.
It's super fun. You'll see the vibe. It's amazing. And, and NIL has happened, name, image, likeness, that has made stars of people who aren't yet in the pros, and and the level of play is extraordinary.
Yeah, to me, there's something about the attention on women's sports right now, and the fact that I could bring my sons and their friends to a Angel City game, and they don't even think of it as being women's soccer. It's just a soccer game that I feel like is really important for equality. I don't know how else to put it that doesn't sound extreme, but it does feel like it's more than just about the business of sports. Do you feel the same way?
I do. I think, the Olympics is often interesting to me. When you think about the Olympics and you think about the stars there, I think about, Elissa Liu, right? And you think about some of the women, the half pipe. I don't know if you saw that. Just extraordinary. And I love that your son thinks of, it's soccer. We're going to a soccer game.
Yeah.
It's neither a women's soccer, men's soccer. It's just soccer. I think that, I don't know, some of these athletes are just so extraordinary. You can't watch that Elissa Liu performance and not think, she's extraordinary. There's no but or asterisk or anything like that. She's extraordinary.
Yeah,
So-
and I think it's so important for my boy. I think it's almost more important for my boys to see those examples than it is for girls to see those examples.
Yes.
And you have two sets of twins?
I do. I have two sets of twins. Each set is a boy and a girl. So I have this scientific experiment of, Are boys different than girls? Often, yes, they are.
Yeah. So what's the result of that, experiment?
The girls are they're more emotional, and the boys are a little more reserved, but they all love women's basketball, so I'm very happy about that. We have some Knicks fans in the group too, but I don't know. I also think I had two sets of children instead of four discrete children, even though of course they're all very much their own thing. But it just seemed it was fertility clinic thing, but it's efficient. I got to say.
If you're going to have four kids, that's an efficient way to do it.
It is. It is.
So I know they're a little bit older now, but the fact that you had this incredible hedge fund career and on CNBC and also parenting two sets of twins, it sounds impossible. This is one of the many reasons I'm so impressed by you. I only have two children, no twins.
Two's a lot. Once you go over one, that's once you actually go to one child, the game is very different.
Is there anything you learned from that experience of having two sets of twins that changed the way you do your job?
Well, I have to say my husband is extraordinarily organized. And I think you and I have spoken about this, about the color-coded calendar.
The color-coded calendar. I love a Google Calendar.
It's a must. And, he really, I have to say, in the division of labor, there was a lot of things that he did that would surprise people. Every application to school, all the medical stuff. I would go to the appointments, but any bill, and all of that he took care of. He was just very engaged and was always very supportive of my career. He always said, all right, we're going to find a way to make it work. And somehow it did, sort of.
It's awesome. A dear friend of mine, Eve Rodsky, wrote a book called Fair Play about how important it is to have clear distinctions about whose responsibility is what, so you don't end up just doing it all yourself.
Right. But you got to let it go when they don't do it your way.
You got to let it go. I think on your podcast, I told the story about how my husband is in charge of breakfast and he makes terrible scrambled eggs. It's just an embarrassment. There are shells in them. It's like a joke. Our kids, the upshot is that our boys learned how to make their own scrambled eggs.
Oh, so that's a huge win.
A huge win. But so through your journey, you also decided to write a book, which was about the secrets about money that you would tell to your two daughters. What inspired you to write this book and really decide that you wanted to be a voice about women and money and teaching women to talk about money?
And teaching women to, I guess, sort of advocate for themselves. It was actually, if I had to distill it in one sentence, to me it was teaching women what I've learned about getting out of your own way. And women very often are what's in their own way.
And what do you mean by that, getting out of your way?
Getting out of your own way, second guessing, right? I think women spend a lot of time second guessing, not speaking up, things that don't come naturally to me at all. Not speaking up. Speaking up actually doesn't come so naturally to me. Negotiating for a better deal, that does not come naturally to me. One of the things I liked about, picking stocks is you don't negotiate with them. That the price is the price. You just buy it. And it doesn't need to know who you are or what, So being able to sort of advocate for yourself, and something also, I think women sometimes have trouble making decisions. They weigh too much. And so a fair part of it is, how to make decisions and how to, that was important to me, to try to distill it into a thesis of how to make decisions and when to know that which decisions it doesn't matter what you decide.
How do you know? What's that secret?
Well, here's the thing. My daughter, we go to a restaurant, the menu comes, this could take a while for her to decide. And someone once taught me, the word desir, whatever the root is death to the other options. So the idea of you are literally getting that's it. You're closing the door on the other options. Um, you gotta let go of that. There's this sort of funny phenomenon: women trying on clothes. Women, lots of women love clothes, trying on clothes. You go to a store, and you might ask a woman you don't know, "What do you think of these?" And women love to, be supportive of us. So, oh, that looks great. Have you ever seen that interaction and a woman go, it doesn't really, no, it's not doing it for you? I mean, your best friend could maybe tell you that.
Yeah, that's why
Right.
you should only go shopping with your friends, because
Yes.
they'll be honest.
Right. So those kinds of things, and recognizing, all right, does it matter if it's this black pump or that black pump? Maybe it doesn't matter.
So
I
letting
wasn't
go
there-
of the low stakes decisions.
Yes. Yes.
It
That's a
really
good-
doesn't matter.
That's a good recap.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so one thing that I thought was so awesome about you writing this book, though, is that you could have just had these conversations with your daughters and your daughter's friends, but you decided you wanted to share this more broadly and take everything you had learned in your career in finance and really pay it forward. And you
Yes.
continue to do that with the podcast, which we'll get into. But what made you decide to take the time out of your crazy schedule to do that?
I really just felt I had something to say, and something to say particularly to women. And one of the things was about taking control of your finances, no matter where you are starting. I give this analogy of, let's say you're diagnosed with breast cancer, and we know 1 in 10 or how many women will be. And imagine hearing that and just saying, you know what, I'm not sure what to do. I'm just going to turn it over to my husband or to help me figure it out. That's not how you would handle it, right? You would be proactive, and yet women feel with finance they can't be, and I don't know why they feel that way. Men are not born with any gene that gives them any more inherent knowledge or ability, and in fact, maybe less so even, to be stewards of their own money than women are.
One thing I love so much about your podcast is that it really destigmatizes talking about money. And I think it's still kind of crazy that women feel this ick factor around talking about money or salaries or investments that men don't seem to feel. And you're right, it's 100% socialized. There's nothing biological about that.
Right. Yes. I went to Wharton, and I was there, and a finance professor asked me, this is like maybe a year or two ago, why aren't more Wharton women, and there's plenty of them, 50-ish% of the class, why aren't they in finance? Finance is the heart of Wharton. And I said, I really think it is. If you major in finance, you are declaring to the world that you want to make money. And some women are not comfortable with that, or they don't want to do it. But if I were to instead say, I want to make money, if I were to instead say, I want to be financially independent, it's far more palatable, but it is the same thing.
It is the same thing, but I think a lot of it is the public. It's not just how they are judging themselves, but it's also the public perception and the public judgment. And in my book, I talk about this expectation that women are supposed to be warm and nurturing. So if a startup founder who's a woman is raising money for a purpose-driven for-profit company, so a for-profit company that's also going to help people around the environment or health or something like that, they are just as likely to raise money as their male counterpart. But if you take away that element of purpose, then women raise less money. And to me, what's crazy about this is adding this element of purpose sort of meets this stereotype that women are supposed to be warm and nurturing, and neutralizes the bias against women for trying to be cutthroat and raise money for their startup. And it's just crazy to me. So I think it's not just this pressure that women put on themselves, but what they're responding to in society.
Yeah. I mean, in your book, you talk about, the disparity of the money raising, which is absurd.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is this, like, are women not asking for enough because they have been socialized to believe they're not going to get it. The disparity is absurd. And the stat we're talking about is that less than 3% of all venture capital dollars have gone to female founders over the past decade plus. Now I think it's less than 2%. But so tell me about your podcast, how you decide who to have on, and why you focus in part not just on how she does it, but also in
Uh-huh.
these the big financial decisions, the best purchase, the biggest financial mistake.
Yes. I feel like it's something that I'm curious about. I think other people might be as well, but for some reason you're not supposed to ask. Something about that. I'm curious, what did you do with the first big amount of money that you made? Right? I don't know. Julia, what's your answer?
Probably went on an expensive trip. I like to spend money on travel more than anything else.
Okay, so I
What
totally
about
get that.
you? What did you spend it on?
Art.
Art.
Yes, yes.
Any piece in particular?
I'm trying to remember what was the sort of real first one. I had always wanted a Liechtenstein crying girl.
Oh.
And so that was one of them. Why the crying girl? I'm not really so sure. It's not deeper than that. I just always like the image. I remember taking modern art as a elective, pass fail, and I just fell in love with it. And then I often think, if I just gone into the modern art business at that time, but that wasn't for me. So
it all turned out fine in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's so important to destigmatize it. Do you think things have changed for women of your daughter's generation in terms of being able to talk about money and ask these questions?
I do. I do think so. I don't know. It's interesting. Would your boys say that? Would they think any differently about a girl asking a question or a boy asking a question?
I mean, they're 14 and 12, so I don't know how much they're thinking about any of this stuff, but they've also been raised by me talking to them about female CEOs for the past decade. So I think they are more aware of discrepancies, but I don't think they've seen them yet.
But I
Yeah.
think the relationship with your husband and you, and how he views you, is really so important for how they view you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was when my kids were little, they didn't have any male doctors, and we had to go to an eye doctor or something. And my son said, "I didn't know that boys could become doctors," and I was like, "Oh my god, this
And
is the
it's
funniest reversal."
I know you're kind of happy about that, right?
Yeah, I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't
Yes.
realize I had only female doctors for my kids." But I thought it was
Yes.
pretty funny.
My children did something similar. We have a female rabbi, and they asked, can men be rabbis too? So maybe
Yeah,
it's
little
changing.
did they know how male dominated the world is. Earlier, you were talking about how fast changing the world is, and how everything, the pace of change, and how you need to be agile and nimble. And I think you're talking about AI, because that's what's changing the world right now. I'm so curious how you use AI, both in your work and in your personal life.
So, in the work, I've been thinking a lot about this issue of unemployment and what will happen. And I don't have a big societal answer to that, but I've also been thinking about, all right, what will it do to the investments, and how will this, who's going to benefit, who's going to not, what are the unintended consequences of this, and sort of coming around to how do I protect the portfolio from dramatic changes. And so I had a long interaction with Claude on this issue, and refining it. I don't love the sycophant. It's not the most sycophantic, but anything, wow, that's a great idea. That part I don't really love, but I do want to just keep pushing and exploring. And it is extraordinary. I mean, it's, if you were to have, an analyst come and you would send them back in a bunch of iterations, it would take days, weeks, whatever. This is, seconds, to come up with the data for this. It's extraordinary. You can't ignore it at all. I do think in a change this big, the unintended consequences are going to be very big as well. And I don't know exactly what they are, but I do try to think about it. But I also feel like I just ask more questions in general about anything, whether it's okay, with an issue with the Fed chair, how actually would it work if the Fed chair did this or that? Things like that, all day long. And I feel like I'm just getting a teeny bit smarter every day.
Yeah,
Maybe,
it's much faster. You can get answers
yeah.
questions answered faster. So then
Yes.
you can have a greater volume of them, and that I
Yeah, and
feel
then
the same
yes.
way. Yeah.
What is
Before
astounding, though, one last thing, is how bad Siri is. How unbelievably bad it is after so many years. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Go ahead.
and then in terms of your other than just for work, do you ask it questions? Does it help with your calendar? Like what is the
Yeah.
personal use case?
I need more. I got to do better on that. I need to
And is
like
Claude your AI of choice?
at the moment, but it's been Gemini and it's been Perplexity, briefly Grok, ChatGPT. Not so much for me, but I try them all, and it's amazing to see how quickly they change. A couple of months ago, we have this class that Gina and I were teaching, and I stepped back from that. And it's called Investing Fix. And I would make these presentations. It would take a long time. And over the last couple of years, it's gotten a lot quicker. But I did one on options, and none of them could get it right. Now it's 6 months later.
None of the AI.
None of the AI could get it right. Now they could easily.
Interesting. And wait, what was the class?
It's Investing Fix. So it's a class that Jean Chatsky and I teach over Zoom every other Monday. But I step back, so she's a new teacher. But she would do personal finance stuff for the first half hour, and the second half hour I would present two stocks, talk about what I liked about them, what I don't like, how they could fit in a portfolio, and we built a portfolio for 3.5 years, and the women were so great. They just want to learn various levels of sort of expertise or in the space, but they all just really wanted to learn. So
yeah, that's so great. Okay, so I know you have to get back to your day, your very busy day, but this is going to be my last question because you just gave me another reason to ask it, which is your life is so busy. You are also teaching a class on top of all the other things you do. What are your life hacks? We ask all changemakers this. I mean, you mentioned you had a calendar, a very intense color-coded calendar with your husband, especially when your kids were at home. But do you have any life hacks that help you manage it all or make sure you have the time to stay focused?
Well, one thing I did with my kids growing up that I thought was really important and really good. I don't cook. I don't cook at all. I don't know how. If we have to order in all the time, that's fine. That's what we're doing. But we had a housekeeper who would cook for us. But 2 nights a week, I would have dinner alone with a child. And it really gave me some one-on-one time with them. Also, it was a lot quieter and calmer than our family dinner, and I would do that twice a week. When I only had the first twins, so they each got a chance once a week. When the second set were old enough, they knew it would be every other week, but they were okay with it because they knew they would have their turn. And yet this created sort of a quiet but unique opportunity for me to spend an hour or two just with one alone, while the other ones duked it out, whatever, with Lawrence.
I really like that. I really like that. I'm going to try that with my kids. Usually just sort of by default when one kid is at basketball. And then anything for yourself, there's all this talk about self-care. How do you stay focused and not get burned out in all of your craziness?
I have 3 friends I grew up with in LA. So three of us live in New York. We go on a trip once a year or a weekend once a year, and I don't know, they're my sort of backbone. And I probably should sleep more, but I just can't. I know I'm doing a terrible job, but that's that I need to fix.
Well, I'm glad you have your friends keeping you grounded. Always an essential life hack. Karen, I'm going to let you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
For Changemakers and Power Players. You are an inspiration.
Well, I'm super excited for next month for your event.
Thank you. And congratulations on your podcast, winning a Gracie, a huge award.
Thank you.
Well deserved.
Fun to be with you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you. One more thing before we go. We hope you'll join us at our upcoming Changemakers Summit, Thursday, April 16th in New York City. We'll be celebrating the inspiring women on the 3rd annual CNBC Changemakers list, with interviews and conversations with the leaders driving transformation and innovation across all sectors of the economy. To learn more about this incredible event, go to cnbc.com/changemakers.